Hi, and welcome to Danny After Dark. If you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a notification or a new episode. Tonight, I have another book review, and this book I'm really excited to talk about with you guys. One, because it's a little close to home for me in regards to being from Boston, and of course, the focus of tonight was a New England Patriot. And then also, if everybody's wondering, Danny in sports? Wait, what? I know. I think this is as close to talking about sports as I've done in a really long time. And that's pretty much what you'll get. So don't worry, I didn't all of a sudden get into sports. There's just a sports tie to this. So, and if you haven't seen the thumbnail or don't know what case I'll be talking about in regard to the book review, it is Unnecessary Roughness, Inside the Trial and Final Days of Aaron Hernandez. And this book is by Jose Baez. And he was his defense attorney for one of the later trials. And it is an amazing book. Jose Baez is not only an incredible defense attorney, but an incredible author, like incredible. I went into this with high hopes because I'd already read one of his other books and it did not disappoint. So, of course, I will recap bits and pieces from the book with you guys. And then at the very end, kind of give my pros as to why I recommend this book. So before I get into that, just a quick hello. Hey, Tony Stewart, you were here before the show started. That is dedication. I hope you're doing well. Capone, good to see you. Also the son of Joan Baez. I don't know what you're referencing. Sorry. And for everybody that is watching but not in the chat, thank you for joining. There's going to be a lot to discuss with this book. I have quite a few notes, and I'm just going to put a disclaimer. If as I'm talking about this topic, because yes, it does relate to sports, if it sounds like, Danny, you don't know what the heck you're talking about with football, then you're spot on. You are absolutely spot on, and we are on the same page. So let's just get that out of the way. Okay, gotcha. For some reason, my mind went to something else, but thank you, Capone, for clarifying that. So the book itself is 276 pages, and out of that, there is about 8 pages of photos, and they are color photos, which is really, really cool. I did not expect that when I got the book, but anytime a book has color photos, it just makes it a little bit more eye-catchy, if you will. But let's see. A few people came in the chat a little later. Hi, Paulcast. Beckham, good to see. Beckham, I'm glad you're here because this is a football topic. So that's probably the only reason why you're here, actually. Oh, for Christ's sakes, Capone. See, like I wouldn't have known otherwise. I would not have known otherwise. Hi, Karen. Hi, Tammy. Hope you and your cats are well. Sending love from Australia. They are. Actually, Leia is in the cat tower right next to me, and she is grooming herself. They all just ate dinner. And yeah, when she grooms herself, it's so loud. I'm so afraid it's always going to pick up on the microphone. But I decided to be a little nice tonight and leave the door open so the cats could come in and out. So if you hear anything, that's Leia next to me. Glad when genders just go over with. Good one tonight. Gotcha. Okay, just making sure. Paul should come in with a karate Dave kick. I want to give that a star, but it's too early to give stars, Beckham. So, all right. So let's get started. So the back of the book, it doesn't have the usual kind of description of what the book is about. It just gives quotes from different news outlets and, like the Los Angeles Times of kind of what they say about the book or about Jose Baez himself. So to get the description of what the book is about, you actually have to go to the inside cover sleeve. So that says, again, I typed it out so I didn't have to look to the side, is the revelatory inside story of the trial and final days of New England Patriots superstar Aaron Hernandez by his attorney and New York Times bestselling author Jose Baez. When renowned defense attorney Jose Baez received a request for representation from Aaron Hernandez, the disgraced Patriots tight end was already serving a life sentence for murder. Defending him in a second double murder trial seemed like a lost cause, but Baez accepted the challenge, and their partnership culminated in a dramatic courtroom victory. A race to contest his first conviction, and ultimately a tragedy when Hernandez took his own life days after his acquittal. This riveting, closely observed account of Hernandez's life and final year is the only book based on countless intimate conversations with Hernandez and told from the perspective of a true insider. Written with the support of Hernandez's fiancée, Unnecessary Roughness takes readers inside the high-profile trial, offering a dramatic retelling of the race to obtain key evidence that would exonerate Hernandez and later play a critical role in appealing his first conviction. With revelations about his client's personal life that weren't shared at trial, and an exploration of the stunning chronic traumatic encephalopathy, I think I got that right, diagnosis revealed by his autopsy, Jose Baez's Unnecessary Roughness is a startling courtroom drama and an unexpected portrayal of a fallen father, fiancé, and teammate. So, a lot to unpack there. And I will say the kind of description of what the reader can expect with the book, that is very spot on. I will say it does give a lot of inside perspective into the conversations with Hernandez between himself and Jose Baez. And yes, it does say that in the description of what the book will be about. But to me, it focuses a lot on that, and a lot of Jose Baez in regards to his coming up to defend Aaron Hernandez. It focuses really a lot on that. And yes, it does focus on all these other things, but that's just something if the reader's like, oh, gee, I really want a good insight into, X, Y, and Z that this book is saying. Those particular things for me is what a lot of the book was about, which, again, I found absolutely fascinating, and hence why I am going to be recommending it to you guys. Hey, Auntie Mimi, welcome. Good to see you. Capone, no Casey for the back. Capone, tune in this Friday for the True Crime and Chill, because we will certainly be talking about Casey Anthony. So tune in then. And just for anybody who isn't referencing what Capone's comment is, Jose Baez also represented Casey Anthony and actually wrote a book about that. And I have reviewed that book on my channel as well. So check that out if you did not see that book review. Hi, Melissa. Oh, you've read it too. Awesome. Good. I really like that. If there's anything, please, as the episode and show is going on tonight, if there's anything that you want to kind of be like, Danny, this, please let me know. That's right. A fellow New England Patriot had to be corrupt. Tony. Let's dive in here, right? So the book starts out with 4 pages, which is a foreword from Cheyenne Jenkins Hernandez. So she talks about her decision to donate Aaron's brain to the Boston University Chronic Traumatic Encephalopathy CTE Center. She also talks about how they met in grade school and how they fell in love with each other in high school and then remained partners from then on. She talks about how their daughter will not be able to see their father as she grows up and her feelings about that. The book also, from her perspective in the foreword, talks about how, and this part was really hard to read in regards to, we hear how she heard that Aaron had died in prison and all the questions that were running through her head when she found out. She touches upon the speculation about Aaron's sexuality since his death. And what she says in the foreword is, quote, Aaron was very much a man to me. I saw no indication that he was gay or homosexual. I wish I had known how he felt, just so we could have talked about it. I wouldn't have disowned him. I would have been supportive. I can't fault him if he was feeling that way, end quote. She also talks about how she has become very close with Jose Baez during the final years of Aaron's life, which makes sense because Jose and Aaron were, in regards to spending a lot of time together, whether it's through in-person meetings or phone calls or correspondence, because Jose was going to be representing Aaron. So that makes sense that they were in a lot of constant contact, which means Cheyenne would have been as well. She ends her part of her foreword saying, "I'm glad Jose is telling Aaron's story. This is an insider story written by the man who knew him best at a time of triumph and tragedy. I'm glad the truth will finally be told." And one thing that she also makes it a point to say is that she felt Jose never really judged Aaron. He was only there to help. And not only did that help extend to Aaron and Cheyenne, but also to their daughter. And even after Aaron's passing, Jose was still willing to keep fighting for Aaron and for his legacy. So that is Cheyenne's forward in the book. And again, I was already like hooked into her part in that. It was very raw. It was very emotional. You really felt a lot of what she was saying. And again, to me, it was really heartbreaking to hear how she found out that he had passed away, because we all just kind of heard that happened. And to hear it from her perspective, how she found out, it made it very, very raw and vulnerable. Just a few people coming in. Hey, Chaos. I just recently watched the show on Tubi about this case. Okay, I did not see that, but I'm curious how you compare that to this book from Jose Baez, who represented him. But welcome. Thank you for joining tonight. So now we get to the part of the book, which is the remainder, where it is written by Jose Baez, his attorney. So Jose right away starts the book where Aaron was in the correctional center in Lancaster, Massachusetts, the maximum security prison where he was inmate W106228, and he was serving life without parole, and he would be there for 2 years. Aaron at this time had been experiencing migraines, but they'd be becoming more frequent and more painful. The migraines also came with hot flashes. He would go from hot to cold, cold to hot, and he would be pacing in his jail cell, holding his head. Jose had questions, and of course, always hindsight is 2020. But what Jose questioned was, when did Aaron decide that this would be his last night on earth? Maybe the disease CTE knew, but ultimately, Jose says Aaron was upbeat when he talked to Jose on the phone just earlier that day. Quote, "I'm so happy. I can't remember the last time I was this happy." End quote. So, Hulu, no worries, no worries. Thank you for clarifying. In case anybody goes to Tubi, it's like, wait a minute, what is being referenced? I can't find it. Thank you for clarifying. So it's on Hulu. It's on Hulu. So in regards to the various correctional and law enforcement reports that detail a timeline account of the final hours of Aaron Hernandez's life, Jose puts in the book what to him would have had to have happened, because again, there's just so many, still to this day, conflicting reports about what happened. So what Jose says is at 3:00 a.m. on April 19th, 2017, correctional officer was making his normal rounds. He slowly walked in the second floor and looked to the inmates' doors and looked through the windows that were on those doors to make sure that they were supposed to be where they were. When he reached Aaron's cell, there was a cloth or curtain of some sort that was blocking the window, preventing the officer from seeing into the cell. The officer knocked on the door. There was no response. He knocked again, more force. Again, no response. When he was able to look into the cell, he saw Aaron, naked, his tattoo-covered body dangling lifeless from a white bedsheet wrapped tightly around his neck. The bedsheet was attached to a bar and a back window located a few feet higher than 6'2", than a 6'2", 240-pound frame. So, hi, Tish. You are perfect. I just started, so welcome. Capone, I actually thought that same thing. I didn't want to get a little too psychology in it, like right at the beginning, but you were absolutely right. So thank you for mentioning that. When people do make that decision to commit suicide, that's one of the things that is reported, as well as family members or friends, loved ones, community members, coworkers will say, well, wait a minute. They were like even more so than they had been. It's a very noticeable that they were very happy, and we know why. It's because they finally made the decision of, this is what I need to do to be at peace. So of course, to them, it's a happy thing. It's kind of as best as I can describe that. But we do see that time and time again throughout suicide cases. So thank you for bringing that up, Capone. So interestingly enough, the regulations for the officer in regards to safety protocol had prevented the officer from entering Aaron's cell without a supervisor's approval. So the officer who could see Aaron hanging from the, with the bed sheet from where he had situated his body, the officer he couldn't go in. He had to wait, and he had to wait not only for supervisor's approval, but for the response team to arrive before he could enter the cell. The officer was supposed to make a mandatory check the hour before. This was policy. However, the officer did not do that, and he would later have to answer for this. The strength of 3 grown men was what it took to push the door open to get to Aaron. They saw that the door entrance had been blocked by various materials, including a piece of cardboard from the back of a notepad. The floor was also covered in a soap substance, possibly shampoo, which made it hard for the officers to keep their balance in there. All the responding officers were struggling, trying to maintain their leverage on the slippery floor, and they were also having trouble cutting through the fabric bed sheet that Aaron had used. After a couple minutes, they were able to cut and slice through the bed sheet and lower Aaron to the floor. One officer started CPR, even though Aaron wasn't breathing and there was no response to the CPR being performed. He had already blueness to his lips. At 3:25 a.m., the ambulance arrived. Paramedics took over critical care and hooked Aaron up to a heart monitor. They also stuck an intravenous line into his leg. He was transported to Memorial Health Alliance Hospital in Leominster, Massachusetts. Emergency personnel and the emergency medical doctor, who had 17 years of experience, all tried to save Aaron. However, at 4:07 a.m., he was pronounced dead. Aaron Hernandez was only 27 years old. So the book now goes back in time when chapter 2 starts. It starts with a letter that arrived on May 15th, 2016 from Aaron Hernandez to Jose Baez. He was reaching out because he felt he did not get a fair trial. He was going to have another trial soon for another murder and was hoping that Jose would contact him back and would be of some help to him legally. Jose had known of Aaron Hernandez before receiving that letter because Jose went to Florida State University, FSU, in the early 1990s and was a big college football fan. He remembers when Aaron got drafted by the NFL to the New England Patriots in 2010. Jose admired Aaron for being one of the few Hispanic players in the NFL to make it. He remembers hearing about Aaron being named as the #1 suspect in the murder of Odin Lloyd, who had been dating his girlfriend's sister. Jose initially says he was reluctant to defend Aaron of the charges on killing 2 men during a shooting at a downtown traffic light in Boston in July 2012. Also, questions were remaining. Did Aaron even have the financial resources to build a proper defense? However, Jose figured he would at least meet Aaron and see what Aaron had to say. So after a week of receiving that letter, Jose met Aaron for the first time in person. Aaron had told Jose that he did not commit the murders in the Boston case. Aaron said it was his friend Sherrod. Aaron said he was an idiot for hanging around the, quote, wrong type of people, end quote. Aaron ended up saying, quote, Jose, believe me, I am innocent. I've never killed anyone, period. I just do some really stupid shit and I can never understand why, end quote. The more they talked, Jose realized at sometimes Aaron had an amazing memory. And then at other times, it was absolutely horrible. For example, He couldn't even tell Jose the name of some of his other lawyers or some of the people who were handling his money. One thing Jose noticed right away and throughout the entire time that he knew Aaron was his heart. Quote, "It was genuine. He wasn't a fake. He owned his flaws and never made excuses for them. He also had a sense of humor." End quote. So Jose felt an immediate bond to Aaron. They were both of Puerto Rican descent and had some similarities in their personalities. That day, Jose spent 8 hours with Aaron. They looked at the case, and Jose noticed there were a lot of holes that the state had against Aaron, but it was being held together by Aaron's, bad boy gangster reputation and image that had started to be presented to the media. So the book at this point goes back in time again. So back to the night in 2012 where Safiro Furtado and Daniel De Abreu were shot and died. Aaron didn't become a suspect in the shootings until nearly a year later. On July 19th, 2013, Mark Sullivan, a sergeant detective with the Boston Police Homicide, he saw on the news that Aaron was a suspect in the death of Odin Lloyd. So Detective Sullivan remembered the video footage that he saw of Furtado and Abreu entering a lounge at the same time on the night of the Boston shootings the year before. This is kind of the spark that led police to focusing on Aaron Hernandez. At this part in the book, it goes over in great detail the detective who worked the case at this point, and after this was questioning if Aaron was involved in these murders. So the entire thought process of that detective is in here, and it's quite detailed. After that part in the book, Jose talks about the defense team that had been working and assembled to help Aaron in court. Jose would now be working with Harvard Law professor Ronald S. Sullivan Jr. in the case to represent Aaron. So, as you can guess, Jose decided to take the case on and to assist Aaron Hernandez. They also brought in Linda Kenny Bodden, who had previously consulted during the Casey Anthony trial with Jose. George Lantar also joined the team as well. Jose began by reading the police reports from the case. There was over 30,000 pages of discovery, which means police reports, witness statements, forensic findings. So a lot to go through. There was also an anonymous call in the case that it appears police had narrowed down to Sharif Hashim, an employee of the Cure Lounge. We get to learn more in the book about Sharif and how that anonymous call came about. But for now, it just kind of quickly mentions it. An interesting note about this anonymous call was that it was made a year after the shooting. So again, it didn't come right when the shooting happened. It was an entire year later. So not only that, but in the book, Jose put the transcript from that 911 call verbatim in here. So you actually got to read through the entire call. And I found that absolutely very helpful and fascinating and part of this book because we'd heard about the call, but to read it verbatim and kind of see what is being discussed, it makes you think. It really does make you think. I'll say that. Hey, Sam Smith. Yes, he was. Hey, Zach, welcome. Hope you're doing well. So the Boston case against Aaron Hernandez, it was always described as a video case. The media reported about a murder that occurred over a spilled drink. That is the narrative that was put throughout the media, especially here where I am. That was what we always heard, that this was a murder over someone spilling a drink, and now Aaron Hernandez is on trial. The video of the Cure Lounge on the night of the shootings a year earlier, police were able to obtain. However, there was something not on any of the videos. A spilled drink. Never happened on the videos. So Jose looked at the videos that were logged in the evidence log, along with other items that was collected in the case as evidence. He learned that not a single piece of video evidence was actually ever logged into evidence. So there was no chain of custody that would have happened with the Cura Lounge video. Jose also realized that the anonymous phone call was created by the police department as well. And the book gets into that. Jose was not sure that the judge would follow the law in regards to not allowing the video to be brought in at trial under the chain of custody grounds. There was also another option to file a pretrial motion to get the judge to rule in advance on whether he would exclude any video because the prosecutor could verify chain of command. Jose had learned the order of events that in the end required 3 detectives to go and retrieve this video footage. Jose was now questioning why. Why did it take 3 detectives to go get video footage that once they obtained, they never logged into evidence? Jose wanted his team to go and inspect the video equipment and video evidence for themselves at the Sarah Lounge. The day before they were supposed to go in person, this prosecutor called Jose with some interesting information. He was now changing the story, stating that the police initially requested only the exterior cameras, not the interior cameras. And by the time the police made a second request for the DVRs, that it had already recorded over the inside footage. Jose knew there was a reason here why people were starting to change their stories. So something was up. Jose and Sullivan set up a meeting with Sharif Hashem at this point. They flat out asked him, what did law enforcement actually request from you? He said, quote, the usual, end quote. That would mean all cameras, including the interior. Sharif had no recollection of the officers asking for only the exterior footage and said he would have found it odd because everyone, including bouncers who drove up to the scene immediately after the victims had been outside Cura Lounge moments after they were shot. The police, however, were saying, no, we requested all footage, both interior and exterior. Aaron was the only one in the club that night for 9 minutes. So again, he came to the club, was in there 9 minutes, and left. There was a photo that was taken by somebody in the club who was actually a fan of Aaron's, and there was a timestamp on that photograph. And that gave police a time frame for Aaron's movements when he was inside of that club during those 9 minutes. Jose believes a lot of things were overlooked by the police and law enforcement here. Remember, the police had all of the video of people coming and leaving that club that night, and especially around the time frame that Aaron was there. Even better, police had what is a video of the ID scanner, which showed the driver's license or ID of everyone who entered into that club. So to Jose, everything was clear. The cops did not want to go looking for anyone who could tell them what happened inside the club during those 9 minutes. So how law enforcement came about this supposed murder weapon that Jose describes is something that makes it easy to convict someone through either faulty science or police misconduct. So a couple of days, about 4 days approximately, after Sharif's call to the Mass Police Department, there was a multi-vehicle crash on Interstate I-91 near Longmeadow, Massachusetts, that exit. And if you're wondering, wait a minute, Danny, why are you talking about a car crash now? It is related. And the book goes into a lot of detail on this crash and who was involved and what happened. Again, I will just be giving you guys the condensed version of this crash. So at the crash, a 19-year-old Puerto Rican girl named Jaylene Diaz Ramos was part of the crash and was transported to a nearby medical center. Her car was towed as there was no driver's license to the car, so they took it away. Troopers did an inventory of the vehicle and located an unlocked black briefcase that was found in the trunk of the car that contained an unloaded silver-colored Smith & Wesson .38 revolver, along with 3 loose rounds of ammunition. The initial report says it was logged into evidence. However, that turned out not to be true. Jaylene was arrested, but it was for failure to produce a firearm ID card. And when Boston police became aware of the accident and discovered the gun, to them, they made a connection that Jaylene had graduated from the same high school as Aaron Hernandez, and she was a Facebook friend of Aaron Hernandez's brother, DJ. So in police officers' mind, there has to be a connection. A long shot one, but to them it was a connection. So a week after the crash, Boston police received custody of that firearm and the 3 bullets and conducted an examination of the gun. The report came back that there was, quote, a reasonable degree, end quote, of certainty that the gun matched the weapon used in the Boston shootings. What we then learn about Jaylene's story is what she gave to the police, again, what she told them. But she got an immunity agreement so that anything that she said could not be used against her. So she then changed her story. The Boston cops did not like this new changed story now that she had immunity and could tell them what they considered what actually happened. So the cops, preferring the first story, they now connected a cousin of Aaron Hernandez to this case. And the police actually had nothing at the time truly linking Aaron Hernandez to the Boston shootings. I know that sounds a little funky. There's a lot of, well, if you believe this, now you have to jump miles to get to this conclusion. And that's what it felt like too when you were reading it. And Jose really does a good job in pointing that out. Well, like, wait a minute, how are they starting here and then jumping all the way over here with their conclusions or whatnot? So you do get that in this book. So Jose now goes through everything that we've learned so far in the case, and he gives his take on it, looking at it from a defense attorney perspective. He goes into a lot of detail, asking a lot of questions as the reader is reading the book. And I found that actually one of the best parts of this book is when he explains things from a defense attorney perspective, he does it in a very simplistic way. So anybody who's reading this book can follow along with what he's saying and what his thought process is. And I found that very helpful. And as you're reading it, like, there'll be questions in your head. Well, wait a minute, what about this? And Jose kind of actually, as you're reading, at least for myself, a lot of the time would answer. It's like he preemptively knew what the reader would be asking and made sure to answer that as well as the book went along. So one of the things that Jose puts in a very simplistic way is kind of the culture that we have now in regards to the media and true crime. And one of the things that people, at least back at this time, were really into is the show CSI. And people who were looking at cases kind of thought, well, why isn't that happening in real life type of thing? You know, and on TV, everything looks so easy. And, you know, after commercials are taken out, the case from start to finish, it's like solved in 40 minutes and everything is good to go. It makes it seem a lot easier than it actually is. And Jose made a point to say things in real life do not work that way like they do on TV. So Jose talks about a lot of different forensic sciences, and I'll just say what those were. I started to take notes to describe them, and I'm like, I don't think I can do this justice because he does an excellent job himself of doing it. So one of the things, or one of the principles is sound forensic science that is based on proven scientific principles. Basically, science is not always so cut and dry. The criminal justice system has an overwhelming majority of accused defendants being people of color and impoverished. So the majority of people who are represented have overlooked and underpaid public defenders. Neither have the time nor the resources to challenge forensic evidence by hiring their own experts. So Jose says because of all of these factors, it leads already to an unbalanced system. The only witness called to testify about the gun for the prosecution in Aaron's case was Sergeant Tyrone Camper. Linda Kenny Bodden had asked him directly if he found anything in his years of testing that connected Aaron Hernandez to any of the objects or the gun that he tested. And his answer was no. Jose talks about the importance of a crime scene, which, as I'm saying that, you're probably thinking, you're into true crime. So you're thinking, well, Danny, obviously why would Jose get into that? That's just common sense. But Jose flips it in regards to, obviously, a defense attorney's perspective of the importance of a crime scene. And it makes sense because there are so many different types of professionals that would be at a crime scene, and they all look at the crime scene very differently because they're looking for different things. They are an expert in their field on a certain things. Maybe somebody's an expert in blood splatter. Maybe somebody's in, really, I don't want to say an expert in, obtaining fingerprints and luminol or whatnot, but there's so many different players in this. So Jose gives his defense attorney perspective on this. He says the scene can tell you a lot about how the investigation itself was handled, the culture of the police agency, and the thought processes of the investigators early on in the case. Jose learned that the examination of the scene of the 2 Boston shootings was cleared just before 6 o'clock in the morning. Remember what I said earlier. The shootings occurred at approximately 2:30 a.m., so that only allowed for 3.5 hours for the victims to be attended to, clearing the area, photographing, documenting the scene, and this was all in the dark. They had to find everything: glass, blood patterns, blood trails. Detectives had to find and speak to any relevant witnesses, towing the BMW away for further processing. Jose says there is no way that the scene could have been processed as quickly as it did in 3.5 hours from start to finish. Jose then provides the reader with a play-by-play of what happened that night. Starting with the first officer who arrived on the scene, Jose does a great job in explaining this and saying what the first officer on the scene's responsibility is. And it's not just in this case, the first officer on a scene in other cases too. If you're not familiar with that, it's worth kind of a little bit of a research kind of rabbit hole, because they are the ones that essentially is in control and in charge of that scene, being the first one there. And that's just putting it very simply. Jose gives the information to the reader about the responsibilities of the other officers as they arrive after, what their jobs are, and what they need to do when they then arrive at the crime scene. So, quick pause. I know I'm throwing a lot of information at y'all. So if anybody has any questions as I'm going through this, please, please, please let me know. And for those of you who have read this book already, or have, like Chaos said, I've just recently seen a documentary on it. By all means, if there's a part in this case where, that really just kind of gravitated to you, that you found absolutely fascinating and interesting, please, please leave a comment in the chat so I can see that as well. All right. So we're still talking about the crime scene that Jose is describing in the book. So when Jose was first going through the police reports on the crime scene, he was noticing that it was the same police department that didn't set up the crime scene log. And they had almost every officer who arrived at the scene fill out a report. So Jose right away began to suspect that something was being hidden here. Because to him, when police officers do this, it's usually to distance themselves from something that they know happened, but do not want to say that they witnessed. One of the officers, Officer Thomas O'Donnell, mentioned that before he arrived at the scene, he saw a street sweeper go by the area. This would have meant that a street sweeper went through the crime scene. The officer's report downplayed that fact by saying that the street sweeper came by on the side of the street where the silver SUV had been. not the BMW. So therefore, this street sweeper, it was completely irrelevant. However, Jose is like, no, that does not make any sense at all. If anyone in the BMW had fired shots toward that SUV, those projectiles would have landed on the far side of the street. And now that street sweeper going through, it would have been completely swept away. So vital evidence would have been swept away. And that was being downplayed by the officer. There were 2 men that had bled at the scene of the shootings, while 2 of their good friends lie dead in the front seat of the cars. So one of those individuals, Sanchez, he would later tell police he did not run. He stayed around at the scene, but got tired of waiting around, so he just left. When police asked him to produce the clothes he was wearing that night, Sanchez says that he gathered the clothes he was wearing and he burnt them, so they were no longer available. Big red flag here. But again, it just seems like these comments are being made to the police, and the police are like, oh, okay, that's fine. Just documenting them and moving along. So police also asked Sanchez for his cell phone. So Sanchez would then go on to testify he didn't own a cell phone. But when Jose and his team went on social media, they saw numerous selfies taken with a cell phone in his hand around the time of the shooting. Sanchez then responded after Jose Baez and his team did that research, well, yes, I do in fact have a cell phone, but it has no cell service. So he would only ever use his phone to take selfies. So meanwhile, another officer was noting that the other individual at the scene who had survived, he waited around until EMS started working on the victims, and then he also just walked away. I have never heard, and Jose doesn't quite say it like this in the book, but I've never heard it where there are 2 survivors to a shooting like this who stay at the scene and then just see everything else going on and everybody's attending to everybody else and they just walk away. I've never heard of a crime scene being set up in that way where law enforcement, there should have been police officers with those men getting statements immediately. So right away, it does not make sense how the scene was set up according to how Jose is laying it out to us. So Jose would learn that after EMS finished putting sheets over the 2 individuals' bodies who had died in the shooting, the windshield crime scene investigators were called to come and photograph and document the evidence. Crime scene personnel took long-range photos of the scene and close-ups of the various blood trails and then took photos of the BMW. The photographs of the bodies had a much better lighting than in the previous photos. That is when Jose realized the photos had actually been taken in a forensic garage. That meant that responding officers and emergency personnel towed the car with the body still in it. Because again, it is very dark outside. And yes, you can have, put your flash on for your camera if you're law enforcement and needing to document something while it is, night out. But it was very clear to Jose, there's a big difference in these photos here. And then he discovers why that is. So one of the 3 main detectives assigned to the case would later testify that the reason they towed the car with the bodies in them was that they needed a search warrant to get in the car to photograph the bodies. Jose's like, that's not true. And for anybody who's watching this is, I can hear you yelling at your screen being like, that's not true. We know that. But of course, the police that have worked this, that is what they're saying to Jose. Well, of course, we had to tow them because we didn't have a warrant to get inside that vehicle. I mean, come on. So now that we've angrily shouted at the scene that makes no sense. So Jose had questioned multiple police officers on the stand about the yellow crime scene tape. And the police officer answered they never entered the BMW. But the truth is, the cops were in the car even before they got a warrant. And Jose and his team were actually able to prove that. And the book goes into how they were able to prove that. And it's just, I think because, at least for me, some of my frustration with reading this is being from Massachusetts, being from Boston. Boston has such a long history of police corruption. And we all were under a microscope last year in 2024 in regards to the Karen Reed trial here that is going on. And it just really highlighted a lot of whatever way you want to look at it, whether it's cover up, whether it's complete inadequacies of the law enforcement officers who handled that crime scene. It just really put a microscope on the state. So to then also be reading this and hearing, okay, well, back again, because this was well over 10 years ago, in regards to when the shooting had happened with these individuals. And you're hearing about how the crime scene was handled, and you're like, oh my gosh, again. Like I didn't go to school to, in regards to how to process crime scenes. But you're reading this and you're thinking, well, a lot of this is completely obvious. Why is it not being done correctly? But nonetheless, here we are. And Jose is making a point to the reader, not only to make those comments of, here's what happened. That's not true, or that should not happen that way. He then goes on to, when he's making those points throughout the book, explain why. And that's very helpful to a reader who maybe knows that that's, you shouldn't be doing that. But what are the real legal reasons why? Or someone who maybe doesn't know that the way that crime scene was handled was completely inaccurate. So Jose does a great job in describing that to the reader. So I do want to make a mention of that. So now the book jumps to 7 months after the shooting in Boston. Aaron had just signed a new contract with the Patriots, and he was awaiting the birth of his daughter with his girlfriend, Cheyenne. So Jose is now distancing himself from his friend Alexander Sherrod Bradley, because Bradley could be in trouble, and Aaron didn't want anything to jeopardize his career and family at this point. And when I say Bradley could be in trouble, it was very frequent. So Aaron really wanted to step back. Aaron, however, was going to be traveling to Florida for the Super Bowl championship party, and he didn't want to go alone. So he asked Bradley to go with him. Bradley initially did not want to go, so Aaron had to entice him. Aaron said he would introduce Bradley to contacts who would supply him with any cocaine purchases that he wanted to make. Aaron said he didn't know anyone personally who was selling cocaine, but he knew enough people who would introduce Bradley to those contacts. We learned about that trip, who they were introducing Bradley to, and who Aaron was in contact with. There was a group of men that went to a club where the bill came to over $10,000 that night while they were down there. So we hear about the story of Bradley leaving his phone at the bar charging because it was on low battery. When he realized this, they had already left. He wanted to go back to get his phone, but Aaron didn't want to do that. So the story that we're getting is Bradley told police that he fell asleep from the long night of drinking in the back of the car. When he awoke, the car was not moving and he had a gun to his face. When police said, well, who was holding the gun? He said, quote, I think it was Aaron Hernandez, end quote. Bradley put up his hand to shield his face just as a shot was fired. So the bullet pierced Bradley's right hand and entered his head between his eyebrows, traveling through his right eye. Bradley would later say he didn't tell police at the time that he was with Aaron Hernandez because, quote, he wanted revenge, end quote. Bradley was shocked because Aaron had been his best friend for so long prior to this point. In the hospital, Bradley had to undergo 3 surgeries, and his right eye was so severely damaged that it had to be removed. When police left the hospital, Bradley used a hospital phone to call Aaron. Bradley said that Aaron seemed shocked to learn that Bradley was actually still alive and said a few huhs before hanging up. Bradley, however, kept calling Aaron back, threatening Aaron, saying that next time he saw him, he was going to kill him. Bradley said he didn't want to cooperate with police, again, because he wanted to get justice himself. He wanted to take Aaron Hernandez's life specifically. Aaron's versions of events that night was completely different than Bradley's. What Aaron told Jose was that the plan was for Bradley to buy X and then drive back to Connecticut with the drugs. When they left the club that night, they went their separate ways, and the plan was for Bradley to meet back at the hotel in a few hours so that he could get his things from his hotel room before Aaron had left to go back to the airport. The next thing Aaron knows is Bradley was calling him from the hospital, threatening to kill him. Jose knew that they had to attack Bradley's version of events, and to do so, Jose had to look at the crime scene. So the defense hired a blood pattern analysis expert to examine the evidence at the scene, and they also set up an appointment with Palm Beach County detectives to inspect the clothing that Bradley was wearing that night to determine if the shooting occurred the way Bradley had told law enforcement that it did. Jose found that the police gave Bradley back his belongings after he refused to cooperate. There were still photographs that were taken at the scene, so Jose would end up using those photographs at least. And the photos that he got completely contradicted Bradley's testimony. Jose gets into the specifics as to how all of these photos were completely different than what Bradley had told law enforcement. So if you want to hear specifically why that is, Jose does an excellent job attacking those photos and showing this does not line up with this does not line up with this. Excellent job explaining that. In regards to the story about Bradley's iPhone, Bradley had never given police any information about his phone number. Instead, he gave police just a random number in Connecticut. Police would have been able to obtain cell tower information and track the movements of the phone. Aaron's cell phone data, for example, it showed that he was at the hotel at the time of the shooting. Let me repeat that. Aaron's cell phone data showed that it was at the hotel at the time of the shooting. His call history also shows that there were multiple calls to Bradley as Aaron was leaving for the airport. Aaron's cell phone records also show that Bradley had not just one phone, but two phones when they were in Florida together. He made many calls from those phones to Aaron both before and after being shot in the eye. Jose then talks about his first court date representing Aaron Hernandez. So now the book jumps to that day in court. And this is where he got to formally meet the prosecution team. Jose talks about a conversation he had with one of the prosecutors one day while they were just kind of simply chatting, where they admitted the case actually boiled down to Bradley and whether or not a jury would find him credible. So Jose and his team did as much background research as they could on Bradley because they wanted to use that, if need be, to completely discredit his story. Jose discusses informants that they were common in regards to the criminal justice system. And that makes sense. That just is not in regards to this case or in Massachusetts or Florida. It's everywhere that there are always informants. So Jose goes a lot of information in detail into informants in regards to typically what are they offering and what are they seeking in return. And Jose relates these by giving examples of a, quote, rat, end quote, and a, quote, snitch, end quote, in regards to Aaron's case. Obviously, he's specifically referring to Bradley. There was a lot that had happened, and the prosecutors actually ignored it in regards to building their case. And to Jose, that was really obvious because in the end, Bradley was serving Aaron Hernandez basically on a silver platter, saying, here you go. You want him? Here you go. So the book now jumps to the point where Jose talks about Aaron and returning home about a week after Bradley was shot. Aaron had contacted Coach Bill Belichick despite desperate to schedule a meeting with him. Belichick showed up, but Aaron did not. Aaron then contacted Belichick again and asked if they could reschedule the meeting. Belichick wanted to do it over the phone, but Aaron was very insistent that it be a face-to-face meeting. He was anxious and he was very persuasive to Belichick. So 6 months after Aaron had been arrested for the shooting of Odin Lloyd, the police squad went to visit Bill Belichick's office to find out what exactly took place and what was discussed in that meeting that he had previously had with Aaron, that Aaron was so desperate that he wanted to talk to Bill. Jose read the report that outlined that police interview. It was apparent that Coach Belichick received what Jose calls star treatment. Belichick refused to be recorded and did the interview in his office with his attorney, who was a former federal prosecutor, so he was present. Belichick told the homicide detectives that he and Aaron had met privately and that Aaron was concerned about the safety of his daughter and his girlfriend. Aaron had told Belichick that he was being threatened by people who might potentially harm his family. However, Aaron wasn't so much concerned about his own safety because he had money. Another concern was that Aaron had recently purchased a property and it did not have a gate or any security. Belichick also told detectives that Aaron expressed an interest in relocating because he didn't feel safe and he wanted to be traded to a team on the West Coast. Belichick really was not about to entertain that request from Aaron, and Belichick reminded Aaron that the team made a significant investment in him and had secured long-term deals with the Patriots. So Belichick was not about to get rid of him. So when Aaron had been formally charged with Odin Lloyd's murder, Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft, who is the CEO of the New England Patriots, immediately distanced themselves from Aaron Hernandez. In the book is the statement that Bill Belichick made just before the start of the Patriots training camp in 2013. So if you want to read that, again, that statement is in the book. And it appeared that the Patriots were actually not only just kind of wanting to get past this, but actually trying to completely erase Aaron Hernandez from their memory. The team even organized a jersey exchange where fans could trade in Aaron Hernandez jerseys for another player at the team's pro shop in Gillette Stadium. So I want to pause to say all of those things that happened that I just described, I remember when that was happening. I remember being on Facebook and seeing friends at the time posting that they were returning their Aaron Hernandez jerseys or whatnot. I remember the news articles showing pictures of the long lines of people wanting to return, trade in that jersey. I remember Bill Belichick in regards to, again, I'm still not a sports person, but I remember the statements that were being made where it was very, and again, I'm not a sports person, like I just said, it was very apparent they were just trying to really distance themselves as much as they could from Aaron. So it was just interesting when I was reading that, 'cause I'm like, I remember that happening. I remember seeing that on the news at the time. So that was just kind of, a little walk down memory lane, if you will. So when Aaron first learned that he was the suspect in the Odin Lloyd murder, he called his agent. Brian Murphy was actually one of the better agents. He put his athletes first. He was the one of the very few people that had never really turned his back on Aaron. And to this day, he remains concerned about Cheyenne and their daughter because he knows what Aaron would have wanted. So Brian made a call to his former law firm, Ropes and Gray, who connected Aaron with the best criminal defense lawyer that they had. This was a man named Michael. The issue was that Michael's experience was in white-collar crimes and healthcare compliance cases. This was, as you can imagine, completely different than a murder case. So 2 other veteran criminal defense attorneys were brought in. Jose talks about how he spoke extensively with the 2 attorneys who were good gentlemen and good lawyers. Jose still thinks, again, hindsight's 2020, that they should have tried that case differently. However, that was, again, it's easy to look at that, after the fact. So what Jose says is, quote, "Many people ask me, do you believe Aaron Hernandez shot Odin Lloyd? Well, I can't tell you. Aaron told me he did not. My honest answer, despite the fact that I knew Aaron, represented him in the case, I don't know for certain. However, after examining the case and how it was tried, I have reasonable doubt that he did it," end quote. Jose then goes through explaining the framework of the law to the jury that they were going to have to follow. He proceeds to then walk the reader through the evidence as it was presented in court. So I made a separate note here that this was, to me, the best part of the book. There were, as I mentioned, a few parts of the book where I'm like, that's great. That's great. Like, that really has my focus on being kind of one of the better parts of the book. However, this particular part, hands down, the best part of the book for me. I found that interesting. So I just wanted to make a note of that. So at this point in the book, the reader is now back in time to June 26, 2013 at 8:45 a.m. This was when police officers and detectives from the Mass State Police Department in North Attleboro arrived in Aaron Hernandez's home to arrest him. And this is a clip, whether it's video or photo, that I feel a lot of people have seen, but at the time of the arrest. So Aaron and Cheyenne were in their bedroom playing with their daughter. Television crews had been camped outside of his home for several days, and they were able to finally capture that moment that they were waiting for, Aaron being walked into a police cruiser. The video of this arrest, it went worldwide. The defense attorneys for Aaron had argued that he should have been released on a $250,000 bail. They pointed out he had no prior criminal record of any kind, and that he was a homeowner, he had a fiance, and he was the father of a very, very young child. The judge did not want to hear it and implied she had already passed judgment based on the circumstantial evidence that she had heard. Jose watched the video footage for himself, again, after the fact of this interaction. He was especially stunned by the judge's comment, quote, "If that's true and based on the presentation, it seems to be," end quote. And Jose's right. He's right at this point when he breaks down to the reader that the judge, by making that statement in the wording that was used, it's basically telling everybody, in potentially a jury pool, that based on the evidence she saw, it seems to be true that Aaron Hernandez committed the crime. And he had not been charged yet. He was not guilty because, again, innocent until proven guilty. But we all knew that he most likely would be. And again, as I've said 20 times already in this episode, hindsight's 2020. But yeah, when you hear that statement from the judge, it's like you're putting out there and implying, again, I want to read it one more time. Quote, "If that's true and based on the presentation, it seems to be," end quote. So the Odin Lloyd trial ended in 2015, and we all know how that ended, with a guilty verdict against Aaron Hernandez for first-degree murder. And that carried a mandatory sentence of life in prison without parole. So Jose talks about Aaron's first 12 months in prison after being sentenced. Because again, Jose got to talk with Aaron, meet with Aaron, and formed a very close relationship with him. So what I really liked about this, not only just this book as a whole, but this part of the book, is you really get that kind of raw perspective that Aaron was able to share with Jose, and then Jose is able to share with the readers. So Jose talks about the infractions that Aaron had received in New York. Prison life was tough, and he just tried to keep up. A tough guy image was starting to take its toll on Aaron behind bars. Again, we go back to what I mentioned very, very earlier on in the book was the headaches. Aaron was having more and more frequent headaches. Jose says, again, in hindsight, that he wished he reviewed these records when he started to represent him because he believed that there were clear signs that something was wrong with Aaron's brain. One of the things that really troubled Jose when he took on Aaron Hernandez on the trial of the 2 counts of first-degree murder was the lack of support that Aaron received from his family members. Cheyenne was there. She was always there. She drove from Rhode Island to Boston every single day to attend the trial. And for those of us who watched the trial, we remember seeing her in court. But she was one of the only consistent people there to support Aaron. The absence of Aaron's family not only was upsetting to Aaron, but it was upsetting to Cheyenne as well. She says, quote, "I feel they gave up on him. The money stopped. They didn't have their hometown hero like they wanted. I don't believe in that. There's no way I would have left him. There's no way I could have left him," end quote. At this point in the book, we learn about Aaron's family members and his parents, Aaron's upbringing, his parents' upbringing. We hear about, Aaron specifically kind of as he's growing up, navigating school, playing football, attending college. So again, it's a bit, as you can imagine, much later in the book that we kind of get that more biographical background of Aaron, but nonetheless, here is where the author Jose presents that to us. So the next part in the book is 65 pages approximately about the trial itself. So what I will say in regards to that is Jose does an excellent job in this part of the book, not only explaining everything from his point of view as a defense attorney, but making sure that the reader understands everything that he's saying, everything that he's arguing in court, and everything that he's questioning of the prosecution. Jose also points out all of the things that the state was trying to hide, trying to cover up, or what they did incorrectly. And there seemed to be a lot that they were doing in regards to trying to hide, cover up, or did incorrectly. So again, about 65 pages dedicated just to this trial. So there's a lot in there for the reader. If that's the type of thing you're into, excellent and very informative. So now the trial is ended and the jury is beginning deliberations. That took several days. On the 6th day of deliberation, February 14th, 2017, it was a Friday and it was Easter weekend. And the team didn't think that a verdict was going to be likely until the following week. So Jose ended up flying back home knowing that, the deliberations were going to continue into the following week and he'll just return on Tuesday. So what he did was Jose gave Aaron a big hug, and Jose says little did he know it would be the last time that he would see Aaron alive. So the verdict came in actually while Jose was on the plane. The other attorneys were with Aaron when they were led into the courtroom. Aaron was found not guilty on both charges of murder. However, he was found guilty of unlawful gun possession. So the judge sentenced Aaron to 4 to 5 years for gun possession. Aaron gave big hugs to all of his defense attorneys who were standing there with him, and he looked back to give a second glance to his fiancée, Cheyenne. Aaron still had tears in his eyes when his lawyer left him, saying, quote, he kept saying, thank you, end quote. April 18th, 2017. Jose wanted to get some sleep without being interrupted, so he put his phone away, which is what he usually did. Because if you can imagine, people all hours of the day and night would either text or call Jose. So after getting some rest, Jose woke and he turned on his cell phone and it was flooded with text messages and missed calls, a lot of them from the 212 area code. That was from New York. And one of the text messages that Jose saw was from a good friend that said, did you see what's happening? And Jose saw the word, quote, committed suicide, end quote. He noticed also that Cheyenne had been calling him repeatedly since 5 o'clock that morning. So Jose called Cheyenne back and said, quote, and what she told Jose was, quote, I got a call at 3 a.m. from the prison. They said Aaron killed himself. They said he committed suicide. I'm on my way to the hospital. I can't believe it. Jose, this can't be happening, end quote. So Jose took the very first flight to get back to Boston. He also called Linda Kenny Bodden to discuss Aaron's autopsy, a second autopsy, but also suspected that Aaron could have sustained a brain injury that might explain his problems with memory, self-control, and remember those headaches. Jose's top priority was to get to Boston and check on Cheyenne when he arrived. And that's what he did. He went straight to her townhouse. She had some friends there with her, and she didn't have any contact with Aaron's family. In fact, she hadn't since his first trial. What we then learn in the book is Jose says Aaron did say goodbye. He wrote 3 letters the night he died, letters discovered in his cell, and were then released by the corrections officials a few days after his death. Jose put all 3 letters in this book, so you get to read each one of those letters. One was to Jose, one was to Cheyenne, and one was to his daughter. Those were, to say very emotionally, I found it emotional to read those letters, especially the one to his daughter. But again, you get to read all 3 of them because Jose put them all in this book. So 2 days after Aaron had committed suicide, Jose told Cheyenne he wanted a second independent autopsy performed. But he most importantly wanted to make sure that Cheyenne was okay with this. And she was, but she said, do not leave his side. So he promised he would not. Jose then talks about that he went to the funeral home to visit Aaron's body. Aaron lay inside a white body bag. When the zipper was opened for the first time, Jose then saw Aaron. And of course, at this time, Aaron was deceased. He realized that until he saw him with his own eyes, that he didn't really believe that Aaron was actually really dead. The only sign of violence was an overwhelming purple bruise around his neck, about 4 inches long and 3 inches thick. Aaron had done this to himself, but understanding why he did it, that would remain a mystery. While he was there, Linda Kenny Bodden called saying, quote, Jose, they are keeping the brain, end quote. So what that means is the Boston Medical Examiner's Office will not release the brain to the Boston University CTE Center. Linda says, quote, we have done everything set for them to pick it up today. And when they arrived to retrieve the brain, the medical examiner's office changed their mind and refused to release it, saying it was going to be further reviewed, end quote. Jose responded, what are you talking about? I'm looking at Aaron right now. He's lying naked right here in front of me. So what that means is, just to back up a minute. So the Boston Medical Examiner's Office is saying, we're not going to release the brain, but we're also not going to release, we're not releasing the brain because we're not releasing the body. They're saying that to Linda Kenny Bodden. But Jose is like, wait a minute. Jose is, when you read this, he is so angry. Like, it comes through as the reader. He is so angry. Like, what are you talking about? Not at Linda, but at the situation. What are you talking about? Aaron is right here. He's right in front of me. What do you mean they have the brain? What do you mean they took the brain? So it was clear that the Boston Medical Examiner's Office did not want Jose and his team to get answers. That's what Jose is saying. So they can just say he was a murderer, he committed suicide out of guilt, and not because he had any type of severe brain disease. Well, there was media across the street from the funeral home that had been filming because, again, anything And I remember this. Anything at the time regarding Aaron Hernandez was just so like front page newsworthy here. I mean, it was in most places from what I recall, but for here, it was just major breaking news. So any type of first glimpse, interviews that reporters could get at anything, they were staking out to get. And Jose, again, with the media being right across from the funeral home, he didn't waste any time. So Jose ran right over to them and told them he would be holding a major press conference in 30 minutes in front of the Boston Medical Examiner's office, and he would be breaking really big news. And Jose, he did that. He realized, and one of the things he talks about is he realized to do all this, he had to break his promise to Cheyenne when Cheyenne said, do not leave his side. Jose had to do that, but he explains like how bad he felt for that, but he realized I have to here to right the wrong that is happening to Aaron. So Jose's press conference, he went on a tirade, and that's how the book describes it, a tirade for 30 minutes explaining what the office of the chief medical examiner had done. He even named the pathologist who Linda had been told by that person they were not going to release Aaron's brain. He told the media they agreed the night before to turn over the brain to Boston University, but in a sudden change of plans, without informing Jose and his team, they just decided not to. He also informed the media that the examiner's office was not qualified to prepare the brain or even themselves try to test it for CTE or any other type of brain disease. Quote, once the medical examiner's office released Aaron's body to his next of kin, they had no authority to keep his brain. They are legally holding his brain. And if they do not release it immediately, we will file a motion for injunctive relief and sue not only the medical examiner's office for the individuals responsible for this decision and in an individual capacity, end quote. After the press conference ended, about 15 reporters stormed the medical examiner's office, and they were demanding answers. So about an hour later, what do you know? The Boston Medical Examiner's office released the brain to the Boston University CTE Center. So the examiner's office, of course, trying to mitigate the really bad media press that they were getting, what they tried to say is the announced the cause of death as a suicide. However, if you take a step back, they issued this without even having the toxicology results back. So they should not have even announced anything about the death because they didn't have all their information, but they did. By the time Jose got back to the funeral home, Dr. Michael Bodden was almost done with the autopsy. So he came in again to assist with this. Aaron was now fully open. He said, quote, one interesting thing I might add is that his skull is unusually thin, about half the thickness of the average adult male. So I have to see the possibility of him having CTE has to be significant, end quote. 4 months after Aaron died, Jose got an email from their contact at the Boston University CTE Center. And I feel anybody who already knows this case kind of knows where I'm going with this and what information was then presented and put to the media. But for those of you who don't know, I'll go over it a little bit. But Jose goes through it a lot more in depth in the book. So in regards to them having the results from Aaron's brain, they were ready to release that information to the next of kin. So Jose thought it would be best if the legal team, his defense team, received that information first and then gave that information to Cheyenne and Aaron's family. So that is what happened. So one of the doctors from Boston University was the contact who spoke to Jose Baez and his team about what they found with Aaron's brain. She explained to the legal team about all of the abnormalities of Aaron's brain. She also stated, quote, Aaron Hernandez had stage 3 out of 4 stages of chronic traumatic encephalopathy. We almost called it stage 4, but ultimately decided to err on the side of being conservative. It was quite frankly the worst case we had seen in anyone of his age, end quote. So before the diagnosis research, it really hadn't seen a stage 3 CTE in a brain younger than 46 years old at all. So keep in mind, Aaron was only 27 years old when he took his life. So to see a stage 3 in a 27-year-old was completely unheard of at this time. So the doctor repeatedly told the team that there was no way a test would have revealed this while he was alive. Again, because we go back to the headaches that he was having, the memory issues. So that's one thing that, to kind of calm Jose in kind of his suspicions that he had, and then kind of frustrations with himself that he didn't push forward with any of this. Again, the doctor made it very clear there was no test that could have been done while he was alive to have shown this. So after Aaron's death, Jose filed the motion through Aaron's appellate lawyers to have his murder conviction thrown out. Under Massachusetts law, for those of you who don't know, when an inmate dies before he or she has exhausted all of their appeals, their conviction gets thrown out. So the judge ruled in their favor in this. So that is where the book ends. So technically, Aaron Hernandez, again, the conviction gets thrown out. I just threw a lot of information at you guys. So if anybody, as I kind of wrap up and give my kind of overall positive and standout points from this book, anybody has any questions or comments, please leave it in the chat. So I just want to make sure I'm also updated with what you guys are talking about. Okay, yeah, a few of you guys are talking about another case, which as I'm like, ooh, I want to know. I'm going to look at that later and read through the comments. But the pros that I took away from this book, and again, it's Unnecessary Roughness Inside the Trial and Final Days of Aaron Hernandez by Jose Baez. What I took away from this is the point of view from the defense attorney. And again, Jose Baez is a very well-known and renowned defense attorney and amazing author. I've read other books by him. Hands down, amazing. So I already went into this with high expectations, and he completely lived up to that. And I think a lot of the time that when we look at a trial and we hear a lot of the evidence that the state brings forward, to kind of hear what behind the scenes the defense does to kind of take that information and either poke holes in what the prosecution and the state is trying to put forward, or to say, wait a minute, the state didn't do their job correctly, and here's why. That is very fascinating, because we don't always, as a trial is going on, especially nowadays where everything is, if not live and televised, we get the stories pretty quickly of what happened in court each day from a lot of trials. And a lot of times it's just a summary. So to see and to read Jose in his process and how he attacked each little point, I found that very fascinating from a defense attorney's point of view. His conversations with Aaron were absolutely amazing, and also sad. They were also sad because we know what's coming. And at the time when Jose is explaining the narrative, he doesn't know what will be coming next. So even like him describing that last hug he gave to Aaron, saying, I didn't know that was going to be the last time I saw him. That last phone call he took with him earlier that day, Aaron was very happy on the phone. He didn't sense what was going to be coming. So you get that kind of raw moment from Jose where he describes each interaction with Aaron, and especially kind of later on where Aaron's going to be taking his life. You hear those and you read those interactions that Jose puts in the book. Jose also puts, as I mentioned when I was describing this to you guys, he puts transcripts in there so you can follow along. He puts the letters, all 3 letters that Jose wrote, that Aaron wrote, one to Jose, one to Cheyenne, one to their daughter. So you get to read a lot of, I would call them kind of evidence-based documents that they're published here in the book for the reader. Linda Kenny Bodden and then Michael Bodden working on this case. I don't know if I did not recall that when this happened. I did not recall Linda Kenny Bodden being as involved in this case as she was. I think I just remember Jose being kind of like the front person representing him. And yes, he had a team of other people. I don't know how I did not remember that. And then when I was reading this book, I'm like, oh my God, she was there. Linda Kenny Bodden was a part of this. Oh my God, I'm a huge fan of Linda Kenny Bodden and Michael Bodden. Huge, huge, huge fan. And yeah, so to hear her part in this and read it, and I found that absolutely wonderful to be like, oh my gosh, she was a part of this and here's how she was and what she contributed to the team with that. I remember the brain being held back from the Boston Medical Examiner's office. I remember that being in the news. I didn't remember if I actually did see or hear at the time this happened, Jose Baez going to the media and saying, here's what's happening and why. And then like the kind of cluster effect of what happened after that before they finally released the brain. I didn't remember that happening when I was reading this. So it was really good for me to, I found, read that section in the book and either refresh a memory that I just forgot about or just introduce it to myself that I just somehow missed it when it first happened. So I found that very interesting reading that because again, I did not remember that happening. Most importantly, one of the reasons I recommend this book, besides it's a great read, an absolute great read, is again, it's very, very close to home for me, being from Boston. Yes, I'm not a sports person, but we are crazy about our sports in regards to we love our players. I might not know much about football or anything about football, but we all cheer for our team. So, we all knew Hernandez, as a player. We all rooted for him. Him, I remember it was a lot of him and Rob Gronkowski at the time. And when this happened and it, he was now, the ex-Patriot player, the fallen star, and then he got that backlash. And then the New England Patriots just tried to, again, kind of erase that he was ever really there. Let's just wipe his memory out of ever existing and being a part of this. Damage control, basically, from the New England Patriots. But yeah, it hits a different level. And especially being here where as big of a town as Boston is, if you will, it's also very small. So, people who either knew one of the players or knew Aaron in some way, shape, or form. And it's just, yeah, so it's very, very interesting and kind of brings it very close to home for me with this book. So, all right, just one last little recap. This is the book that I highly recommend everybody to get and read. So Unnecessary Roughness, Inside the Trial and Final Days of Aaron Hernandez by Jose Baez. So anybody has any last questions or comments on this book, please leave them in the comments down below and I will certainly get back to you. If you've read this, What was your takeaway from this book? Do you recommend it to others? Was there something that maybe I missed that you really found of value in this book, or whatnot? By all means, please leave a comment. So I will see everybody else this Friday for the weekly True Crime and Chill. I look forward to that. It's Tuesday today when I'm recording this. There's already been so much in the news this week. I'm just like, where's Mr. Beckham? We could probably do a show for tomorrow night and just wrap up the week. There's just so much that has already happened. But nonetheless. Hi, Todd. Jose Baez. Well, just got home from work. Well, late night. Hope you had a good shift at work. Welcome home. Enjoy your evening. Tish says, wow, I avoided that case. So thanks for the nutshell. How did you avoid that case? I don't think it was possible to avoid that case. So I'm impressed that you did. Thank you, Zach. That's right. That's right. Chaos comes out on Friday. Oh, Capone. Yes. Yes, we will be discussing that later in the week for sure. All right, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I will see you later this week for the True Crime and Chill. Remember, until next time, we don't live in darkness. Darkness lives in us. Bye, everyone.